Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saritam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Shah Om Agyantimirandasya Yananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Bhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadha Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam. Ayam Tat Sat. Okay, we're going to start with chapter 15 today. There were a few verses left in the last chapter that we didn't read, but after Kritaduti vocalizes her frustration with providence, with God, her lamentation then again latches on to the dead son, and she speaks to the dead son, please return to me, your friends are waiting, I haven't yet fed you, why are you sleeping so long? And so the lamentation has caused this utter bewilderment, basically. After which there's a short description of King Tritaketu's own bewilderment. And as it's described as due to his own lamentation, it was as if he was dead. And therefore, being as if dead, the kingdom, which is dependent on the king, was without leadership. And so Angira Rishi, I don't know where he's at, but he got word of this. So he and Narada Muni, they fly in order to give enlightenment to Tritaketu and save the kingdom in this way, which was without leadership because the king was compromised by lamentation. And so chapter 15 opens up with the appearance of Angiradishi and Narada Muni to give instructions to Tritaketu. It should be stated here that we want to be reminded that this whole narration has a context. The context is a question of Parikshit Maharaj concerning precisely how it was possible for Vitrasura to have such profound devotion, even though being in the body of a demon. It is not even saying that great sages have such devotion, and they're completely pure in their minds, and they don't have great devotion. So how is it for someone who's lower in terms of his qualities of nature to have such profound devotion? That's the context of the whole narration. And so the narration is intended to answer that question. So we have to be on the lookout for how the answer is coming to that question. In the meantime, other elements are being brought out to the fore. And for example, what's being brought to the fore here is, well, we'll see in the teachings of Narada Muni and Angiradishi. But I quoted this verse previously. It's an important verse to remember. Kata imaste katita mahi yasham vitaya lokeshu yasha pare yusham Vijnana vairagya vivakshaya vivo vacho vibhutir natu paramartyam. So this is Shukadeva Goswami toward the end of the Srimad Bhagavatam speaking to Parikshit Maharaj, and he's describing why it is that he speaks about the narrations of the kings. So he says, I spoke to you about these narrations of the great kings. Kata imaste katita mahiyasham. These kings who are vitaya lokeshu yasha pare yusham. They spread their fame throughout the world and then departed. The reason I spoke this to you, vijnana vairaga vibhakshaya vivo, is because I wanted to teach Gyan and Vairagya through these narrations. And vacho vibhutir, these narrations about kings, they lend vibhuti, like opulence, to the subject matter, which would otherwise be kind of boring. Jnana and Vairagya are not exactly subjects of interest for the mind, especially the mind that's steeped in bhakti. So hearing about the narrations of these great kings who were so nicely situated in terms of the material estimation, and they're being frustrated in their desires, what to speak of those who are less fortunately situated in the material energy. That's the idea there. Therefore, I wanted to teach about Jnana Vairagya through them, through their narrations, and then hearing about Kingsland's opulence to these narrations, but not to paramartha. This is not necessarily, how is the language Prabhupada uses here? This does not constitute paramartha. So paramartha means the ultimate meaning or the ultimate purport, the supreme truth. Learning about Jnana Vairagya is not the supreme paramartha. So what is paramartha then? If that Jnana Vairagya is not paramartha, what is paramartha? So this is 12.3.15. Next verse, he says, Yastuta mashloka gunanuvada. So but is a contrast to what he just said. So he wants to say, what is paramartha in this verse? He says, anuvada. So anuvada means the kirtan, basically, the recounting of the uttama shloka guna, the qualities of uttama shloka Krishna. Sangiyate dikshanam amangalakna, which are sung and accepted, and which destroy inauspiciousness. Tam eva nityam shunuyat abikshnam. So these should be heard and sung every day. Krishna amalam bhaktam abhi samanaha. For by those who desire bhakti, amala bhakti, pure bhakti unto Krishna. So this is paramartha. So anyway, we're about to hear teachings of Angira Rishi and Narada Muni. These teachings are on Jnana and Vairagya. So this is not the ultimate subject matter of the Bhagavatam. It's not ultimately the ultimate purpose of the narration itself. They're kind of like a side narration. And why does these side narrations come up about Jnana and Vairagya? Because they are useful and can be counted within the culture of bhakti insofar as they're supportive to bhakti. So there's a technical term for this called Sangha Siddha Bhakti. So Sangha Siddha Bhakti means that which is assistive to bhakti, basically. Karma, Gyan, teachings on karma and Gyan, which may assist a culture of bhakti. Then they are also included as bhakti only because or insofar as they're supportive of bhakti. So Jnana and Vairagya, a little bit of Jnana and Vairagya you will find their teachings in the Bhagavatam. A little bit is there because they can assist the culture of bhakti. Not too much though. Rupa Goswami warns is not too much, because if you're too much into that, it will cause our heart to become hard. That is the result of the constant rigor of analysis. It causes the heart to become a little hard. That becomes not useful for bhakti. But a little bit it should be there. So these teachings on Jnana Vairagya are coming a little bit, because they can be supportive to the culture of bhakti. Insofar as bhakti is characterized by absorption in Bhagavan. So if you're absorbed in Bhagavan, it's very hard to be absorbed in Bhagavan when you're preoccupied with what's happening in matter. And so there needs to be a little vairagya. And that vairagya is an actual corollary of realizing that actually the self is different from this world. And therefore, I need not be totally preoccupied or bewildered by the eventualities that manifest in the world of the Sat, because I see myself as apart from that. So that can be helpful to the culture of absorbing ourselves in bhajan. So sometimes it is seen that these sorts of teachings come up in the Bhagavatam. So having said that, that's the context here. The first 8 verses of chapter 15 are basically Angira Rishi Narada Muni teaching about Jnana Vairagya to Tritiketu. So let's hear that. So he said, Sri Shukadeva Goswami said, while King Tritiketu, overcome by lamentation, lay like a dead body at the side of the dead body of his son. The two great sages, Narada and Angira, instructed him about spiritual consciousness as follows. So their teachings start in verse 2. O king, what relationship does the dead body for which you lament have with you? And what relationship do you have with him? They want to know, why are you lamenting? Why I'm lamenting over the relationship with the body of my son. Say, well, what is the relationship of this body to you? Well, this is my son. What is your relationship to this body? I am the father. That is the answer to that question, conventionally explored. So he said, you may say that you are now related as father and son, but do you think this relationship existed before? Does it truly exist now? Will it continue in the future? Tvam chasha katamasha puredhanam atapara. So you say the relationship is between father and son. The question is this relationship real or is it not real? So for Vedanta culture in general, including our Vedanta culture, what is the definition of real? The definition of real is that which exists in past, present, and future. That is real. This is Krishna saying in the very outset of Bhagavad Gita, Nasato vidite bhavo, na bhavo vidite sataha. He's defining what is sat and asat. And he says sat is true or eternal or having reality. Sat is that which has no abhava, na abhava. Abhava means absence of being. So that which is true has no absence of being. And that which is asat, ultimately not true, has no endurance. That's how Prabhupada translates it. It has no nabhava, it has no being. So that which is true has no absence of being. And that which is asat, not true, has no true being. And no true being means it is here today and gone tomorrow. So the definition of reality for Vedanta culture, Advaita, Gaudiya Vaishnavism also, is that that which is true has existence in past, present, and future. And that which exists can never have absence of existence, right? So therefore, the jiva is true. Maya Shakti is true, because Maya Shakti can never not be also. God is ultimately the foundation of all that is true. He was, what is that verse from Gita? Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings. We may add, nor the Maya Shakti, nor in the future shall any of these cease to be. So these things are true. They have reality. But that which is here today and gone tomorrow has no reality. So he says, what is the relationship between you and this body? And we say, oh, well, that is my son and I am the father. So the question is coming, is this true or is this not true? Is this sat or is this asat? If it is sat, then there can be no absence of this relationship in the past or in the future. That means in the past, before this life, also this was your son. And in the future, also this will be your son. But that is self-manifestly not true. Therefore, this statement, I am the father, I am the son, is asat. It has no true existence. It has no true being. Another verse from this Sankhya section of Gita chapter 2, Avyaktidini Bhutani, I forget the verse, I haven't quoted it in like ages. But that the verse is saying that which has no, existence in the beginning nor in the end doesn't truly exist even in the present. This is a statement that refers in context to the material body. The body wasn't there in the past, and it won't be there in the future. Therefore, is it really there now? There's a Vedantic way of thinking. It's like a dream. Before you have the dream, it wasn't there. And then after you wake up, the dream doesn't exist. So did it really exist even when you were dreaming? It has temporality. It is characterized by temporality, which means nabhava, no true being. Or we may add a qualifier there, no truly abiding being. Therefore, this is not true. The statement, I am the father and this is the son, that is not a true statement as far as Vedanta is concerned. Because true means true in past, present, and future. So this is actually not a true statement. This is asat. This is asat kata, or asat way of thinking. It is not true. Otherwise, truth cannot have absence of being, right? Recently, I've been asked in the last week by like 3 or 4 different devotees about my journey to Krishna consciousness. And I've been talking about the fundamental question that vexed me at the age of 18, which was, is romantic love true? That was a question that vexed me. And I often, when I asked to tell my story, I always open up with that any genuine spiritual life begins with core questions that need answers, and like metaphysical questions, like the sort of archetypical questions of existence that any soul who's on a journey of spirituality would have to contend with. So one of these sort of questions, archetypical questions for me is love, specifically romantic love, is it real? So as I was telling my story in the last week or so to different devotees, I was thinking about, that was a question. Is it real? And what is reality? That which exists in the past, present, and future. It has no absence of being. That is real. So I wanted to know about that. Obviously, at 18, I would not have been able to articulate it in that particular way. But that is ultimately the question. We want reality. We don't want that which is insubstantial. Because anything that is asat, not truly abiding, is a cause of sorrow. That is the implication of asat. Prabhupada's language in the introduction of Gita, I always like. He says, in the material world, we're always being threatened by asat. We're always being threatened by asat. And what is the meaning there? We invest our energy in that which is not truly abiding being. And the result of such an investment is sorrow, proportionate the degree of investment. So the investment is very heavy, the sorrow will be also very heavy. So such is the situation that we're seeing now. And Trutiketu, the investment in asat was extremely intense, and the result is intense sorrow. So they're trying to pull him out of this lamentation by teachings on reality. Okay, so next verse. So you may say that you are now related as father and son, but do you think the relationship existed before? Does it truly exist now? Will it continue in the future? Nope. Next verse. Okay, so O king, as small particles of sand sometimes come together and are sometimes separated due to the force of the waves. So that's the first line. Yata prayanti samyanti shrota vegina paduka. So the living entities who have accepted material bodies sometimes come together and are sometimes separated by the force of time. So tata, in the same way, kalena dehina, the embodied beings, due to the force of time, they are united and they are separated. So the dehina, the embodied beings, so those are the jivas. So the jivas here are being compared to sand. And just as the waves bring sand together and separate them, so time factor brings living entities together and separate them. The import of this statement is that they have no ontological relationship with each other, the jivas. What to speak of the jivas, neither the jivas nor the bodies of the jivas have any true relation with each other, truth being insofar as existing in the past, present, and future. So their relationship is an arrangement of time. That's all. It's just an arrangement of time. And at the same time, we'll arrange for that relationship to be broken. Because it can be broken because it doesn't have any truth in it in that sense. It's not set in that sense. So it is just a play of time, bringing together and separating. This statement comes up quite a bit in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and different analogies are given to describe it. Another one that you'll hear spoken by Hiranyakashipu, no less, in the 7th canto when trying to pacify his aunt for the death of her son. Was it his aunt? His aunt or his brother's wife, for the death of his brother. He also gives this example of there being like a well, and travelers, they all congregate at the well. They may build up some temporary relationship at the well, and then they depart, never to see each other again. Or we have to give a 2022 example. You get on the bus with someone or plane with someone, you might strike up a conversation while traveling. You're like, buddy, having a good time. And then afterwards you separate, never to see each other again or talk to each other again. So like this, all the relations in this world are like that. And in this way, the jivas are suffering alone. Suffering alone insofar as we are we're helpless in this process, being brought together, separated. We're helpless in this process, and there's no one who can really help us. Help us. What's the word? Not resist. We're helpless in this process, and there's no one aside from God that can help us hold the sort of sorrow that is endemic to this whole process. In other words, when you're suffering, no one can get you out of the suffering. The subjective experience of frustration that comes from being brought together and separated. As I've been saying in a lot of my recent classes, there's only one person that can sit with us in the privacy of consciousness, and that is God. That is the meaning of the word upasana, which we generally translate as worship. But upasana means to sit near. Asana means sitting, and upa like near, to sit near God. And I equip also, do you want a friend sitting near you? Do you want a lover or beloved sitting near you? But in any case, there is only God who can sit in the privacy of consciousness. And why I say that, because when we're dealing with the experience of union and separation, as Prahlad Maharaj also says, the result is a fire of lamentation. Yasmat priya apriya viyoga samyoga janma shoka nina sakala nyoni shuddhayama. The result of this whole process is a fire of lamentation, particularly when identified with material bodies. It is a fire of lamentation. And so who can extinguish such a fire? So that is only Bhagavan. Dugosha danta apiduka mata diyaham bhumam brahmami vadame tabadasu yoga. The living entities try to find out their own remedies, dukkha oshadam, for this suffering, but their remedies are also added to the dukkha. So Prahlad Maharaj, having observed this, says, please teach me about your devotional service. Please teach me how to sit near you, how to sit and commune with you. You're the only one who can help extinguish this fire of lamentation that is a result of this process. Okay, so your relation is not true. It is the arrangement of kala. That is the point that he's making here. Next verse. So when seeds are sown in the ground, they sometimes grow into plants and sometimes do not. Sometimes the ground is not fertile and the sowing of seeds is unproductive. Similarly, sometimes a prospective father, being impelled by the potency of the Supreme Lord, can beget a child, but sometimes conception does not take place. Therefore, one should not lament over the artificial relationship of parenthood, which is ultimately controlled by the Supreme Lord. So yata dhanasu bhai dhana bhavanti na bhavanti cha. You plant a seed and the ground. Yata dhanasu bhai dhana, just as one does that. And sometimes there's generation from that seed, bhavanti, and sometimes there's no generation from that seed, not bhavanti. So evam, like this, bhutani bhuteshu, like this, one living entity is able to give rise to another living entity. Bhutani here, the word bhuta means that which is coming into being. It is a reference to the material body. Although sometimes the word is also used to refer to the jiva. The word bhutani means that which comes into being, which comes to be. It's a reference to the material body. So like that, one body is able to give rise to another body. Chodita Isha Mayaya. This is all being impelled by Isha Mayaya. Isha Mayaya means the Maya of Isha. Isha means the Supreme Lord. So by his Shakti, by his Maya, one living entity can give rise to another living entity. And without his Shakti, then it doesn't happen. There was a verse in this regard. So it also comes in Prahlad Stuti. And I did think of it, but I forgot to look it up. I'm going to look it up now. There's actually kind of a famous verse in the early part of the Stuti. It's verse number 18. It's been a while since I actually looked at this particular Okay, verse number 19. Yeah. Balashane hasharana pitoro nisima. Nartasya jagadamudhamati majato no taptasya tap prativide. Yarihanja ta vavi botanabritam tarupekshitadna. So here Prahlad Maharaj is saying that souls who are in the Bali concept of life and neglected by the Lord, they cannot do anything for their betterment. Whatever remedies they accept, although perhaps temporarily beneficial, are certainly impermanent. For example, this is why I'm thinking of the verse. A father and mother cannot protect their child. A physician and medicine cannot relieve a suffering patient. And a boat on the ocean cannot protect a drowning man. So the idea is that, no, we have seen it, that medicine heals a person and a father and mother protects their child. But it is also saying that despite their desire to do so, it doesn't happen. A mother and child tries to protect the child, and the child still becomes harmed. A physician in medicine attempts to cure a patient, the patient still dies. So it is not the attempts, the word used here in the Sanskrit, taptasya tap pratividir, the attempts to counteract the suffering, they're not ultimately the cause of the counteraction or success. There's another force that allows them to be successful. And in the verse we're looking at now from Chittaketu, it is called as Isha Maya. He is the ultimate ground or the ultimate potency that allows for things to take place and without which things do not take place. So in other words, the cause of you being able to have a child and establish this temporary relationship of father and son, that is not rooted in your action or the action of the child, but that is rooted in another potency, the potency of Bhagavan. So just as Bhagavan is given the child, so Bhagavan can also take back. What is the problem? So this, I will not do it today. Maybe we'll do it tomorrow. But I want to read the Shoka Shatana, this 13 prayers written by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur on the pastime of Srinivasacharya losing his son. Maybe we'll describe it. But in brief, the story is in Srivas Angam, there are big kirtanas going on. And in the very outset of the kirtan, which would take place in the night, in the very beginning of the kirtan, one of Srivas's sons died. And all the women, began lamenting. And Srivas Thakur, he goes to the back of the house. He realizes something's amiss. So he goes to the back of the house. He encounters his lamenting wife or wives. And he immediately began saying, if, stop this crying. This is all the arrangement of the Lord. He tries to preach to them, but perhaps similar to the sort of Gyan instructions we're hearing here. And then finally he said, if you don't stop your crying, I'm going to drown myself in the Ganga and give you something to cry about. So they all kind of sober up. His whole point was don't disturb the ecstasy of Mahaprabhu. And so Mahaprabhu's kirtan goes on throughout the whole night. And after the kirtan gets over, Mahaprabhu's I feel like something inauspicious has happened. I'm not feeling the same exaltation of joy like I normally do. So then Srivas says, yeah, I had a son that died in the beginning of the kirtan, but I didn't want to disturb your ecstasy. That would be a great crime. And of course, Mahaprabhu goes, and like we'll hear in the Chittaketu pastime, he revives the son preaches, Atma Tattva, and then again leaves. But in the course of those teachings, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is writing that the Lord has given, so the Lord can also take away. So what is the problem if you recognize this? Just like Parikshit Maharaj, the Lord has given me life by saving me in the womb of my mother. And now that same Lord wants to take it away by having me cursed by a Brahmin boy. So both are Isha Maya, both are coming from him only. So why should I protest the will of the Lord? Why should I protest the will? But not recognizing that will of God and being invested in material bodies and the spirit of separation from God, Pritak Bhava, the result is this deep sorrow. So this is the result. So here I'm Giri Shinarmuni trying to turn him towards the will of God. This is the will of God. Okay, let me do one more verse. It actually goes up to verse 8. He says, O king, both you and we, your advisors, wives, and ministers, as well as everything moving and not moving throughout the entire cosmos at this time, are in a temporary situation. Right, okay. So before our birth, this situation did not exist, and after our death, it will exist no longer, right? So therefore, our situation now is temporary, although it is not false. So this idea we've already discussed elaborately when discussing the first verse. That which doesn't have reality at the beginning and end doesn't really have reality now. Doesn't mean that it's not, he's here, Prabhupada's adding, it's not false. The products of Prakriti are not false, but they are not substantial, was the idea. They're here today and gone tomorrow. So we'll do the next verse also. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the master and proprietor of everything, is certainly not interested in a temporary cosmic manifestation. Nonetheless, just as a boy at the beach craves something which he is not interested, the Lord, keeping everything under his control, causes creation, maintenance, and annihilation. He creates by engaging a father to beget a son. He maintains by engaging a government or king to see to the public's welfare. And he annihilates through agents for killing, such as snakes. The agents for creation, maintenance, and annihilation have no independent potency. But because of the spell of illusory energy, one thinks himself the creator, maintainer, and annihilator. Yeah. Anapeksha api bhalavat. So just like a boy who is anapeksha api, although not interested, he may, like perhaps he creates a sandcastle. That was the image that came in my mind. He creates a sandcastle and then he just leaves it there and the waves come and knock it over, whatever, he doesn't care. So he's comparing the Lord to like this. We're kind of playthings in this sense in the hands of God, probably a conception that doesn't sit well with the secular demeanor. Like to be a plaything in the minds, to be a plaything in the hands of another just sounds so demeaning. Of course, in a particular context, like Prabhupada said, I'm like a puppet in your hands, make me dance, make me dance. But it's all that's very beautiful. And the living entities may even speak like this in relation to each other. I love you so much. I just want to be a plaything in your hands. Which is foolish because what as a limited living entity, what if you're a plaything in their hands, all sorts of disaster will take place. But if you say same idea relationship to God, the Pratak Bhav, the separatist mood becomes disturbed. But this is the reality. Other picture of Pibhalava, like a boy who has no interest. So the Atma Shrishtai means things that are created by God, things that are maintained by God, and then things that are ultimately destroyed by God. That is the indication here, Atma Shastraya. Aswatantraya, and these things have no independence. God is the very ground from which everything emerges, the ground on which everything rests during the maintenance period, and the ground into which everything returns at the time of destruction. So Aswatantraya, we have no independence, just like you can't walk unless there's a ground to walk on. So there can be no being unless there's a grounded being upon which we exist. We have no independent existence. And therefore, when God creates, maintains, or destroys, Srijanti Avati Hanticha, then he does so through different living entities. Bhutesha, the Lord of the Bhutas, the Lord of those that come into being. He creates, maintains, and destroys, some living beings by some living beings. So the idea here is that the idea here seems to be that one is looking at the manifestations of family, friends, and governments, etc., as manifestations of the Supreme Lord, through which he is performing his work of creation, maintenance, and destruction. This is the vision of non-duality. And ultimately, we were having a conversation in one of our other Bhagavatam groups that how the process was happening in front of us now. And I said, one of the meditations I had during lockdown period, I go to periodically to help me not be so crazy about what's happening, is that nature itself moves in these cycles of creation, maintenance, and destruction. That's the nature of nature. Not only nature we can see, but also internal nature. We also move in cycles like that. For example, when I became a devotee, that was a creation of a new identity. I became a brahmachari. And then that identity was maintained for some time, and then it was destroyed when I left the ashram. So this happens not only externally, but it happens internally. Everything moves in these particular cycles. And so societies or civilizations, they also move in these cycles. They're created, they're there for some time, and then they're destroyed. And death doesn't have to be death is experienced as a horrible thing, but also death is required for new beauty to emerge. You know, the classic example is of a caterpillar entering a chrysalis and emerging as a butterfly. The chrysalis represents a destructive part of the cycle of nature. And it's really harrowing to hear about. The body of the caterpillar is literally like dissolved. So I remember reading, if I read it, if I recall properly, their body is dissolved into like a goop, basically, of whatever proteins and amino acids or whatever it is. It's like this protein goop. And then it reassembles and he emerges out of the chrysalis as a butterfly. And the butterfly is very beautiful. Of course, sometimes they become moss. That's not as appealing. But in any case, we'll use the beautiful butterfly as the example. So death can also be a period for new life to emerge. And so in that sense, it is also kind of beautiful. It's only not beautiful when you resist it and you're attached to the way things were, the way things were. That attachment causes us to resist the transformative process, and it takes place in any case because it can't be resisted. It is ineluctable, which is a cool vocabulary word. But if you enter into that space trying to resist it, then what comes out on the other side may be deformed. In other words, often it is seen when we resist transformation, then we develop all sorts of like weird neurosis on account of that resistance, which is ultimately ineluctable. So then holding this vision, like, okay, nature moves like this, and ultimately nature is being controlled by God. This is his process. A non-dual vision of creation, maintenance, instruction, of nature, of our psychologies, of civilizations, like we're seeing now, that is ultimately rooted in God. God, through this agent, is doing creation. Through that agent, he's doing maintenance. Now, through these agents, he is doing destruction. So how am I to engage with that so that I come out of it a butterfly instead of coming out of it, or not coming out of it, or coming out of it having developed neurosis? So this vision, in other words, he's trying to root his Angera Rishi and Naramuni, rooting his vision in non-duality. All of this is actually a manifestation of God. And through these various agents, he is accomplishing his work. And it is that ability to see God. I think they use the word prospector. Prospector means someone who like unearths the gold from the ground. I think they're called prospectors. So one who's able, like a spiritual prospector, he's able to unearth the God in that scenario by this vision of non-duality. Then he can emerge from the experience of destruction, like Tritaketu is experiencing now, ego death. He's experiencing an ego death, the death of the sense of being the Father. He can emerge out of that with new life and new beauty, but not without the ability to unearth the presence of God even there as well. So such instructions are coming to him. Okay, we're going to pause there. Sorry, 9:10, and see if anyone wants to say anything. We'll read a couple other verses here, but Tamir says, it is not a sat because the father feels affection for his son, not for other children. Therefore, it is neither sat nor a sat. I don't know if I get your logic here. It is not a sat because the father feels affection. That affection is also a sat because it wasn't there before the son was born. It came into being after the birth of the son. Now, of course, it's lingering now, but it wasn't there in the past, and therefore it is called as asat. Otherwise, if it was sat, the affection should have been there before the son was there. But that affection was dependent on the birth of the sun coming into being. As a side point, this is why this whole controversy around bhakti inherent, non-inherent. The very verse that is quoted by all parties in this regard, in this context, the Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema verse, and that verse is an echo of Rupa Goswami's verse, Nitya Siddhasya Bhavasa Prakatam Hridi Sadyata. So in that verse, Rupa Goswami is trying to describe how bhakti is a sadhya. Bhakti is divided to sadhana and sadhya. And sadhya has two parts, bhava and prema. So how is bhakti a sadhya? Because in the material world, a sadhana is that which brings into being something that wasn't there before. So you do some sadhana and something that wasn't there before comes into being. So if something comes into being, it is called as asat. So Rupa Goswami wants to say this bhakti is not asat, this bhakti is sat. It always exists. That's what he wants to say. So he says, when I say that this bhakti is a sadhya, sadyata, what do I mean by sadhya here? That's what he wants to describe in the second half of this famous shloka defining sadhana bhakti and BRS. What do I mean by sadhana? I don't mean that by doing sadhana something comes into being that wasn't there before. Otherwise, if that was the case, it is asat. If it is asat, it cannot be the goal of life, because something that is temporary is linked to sorrow. So that cannot be the goal of life. No one is trying to be miserable. So therefore, what do I mean by satyata? He said, Nitya Siddhasya Bhavasya. So this bhava is Nitya Siddhasya. It is eternal. So that means it's sat there in the past, present, and future. And it is perfect. Pakritam Hridi is simply manifest in the heart of one who has purified himself by the proper sadhana. Who's prepared his chitta for reception to that manifestation through the processes of hearing, chanting, etc. So that is the actual context of why Rupa Goswami writes that line. He wants to say that this bhakti is not asat, it is sat. It doesn't come into being. So the affection, the reason I got triggered in my mind, because the word affection, bhakti, that's how I got triggered in my mind. This bhakti doesn't come into being, but in the case of the affection for the sun, it came into being. And the cause of it coming into being was the body of the sun coming into being. And we don't know if that affection will remain. So that's why the Amgir Rishi said Harsha Shoka. First he'll be cause of jubilation, but then he'll be called the cause of shoka. So shoka means that the father and son, they can become enemies also. It is saying the life of many kings and many people in this world, father and son become enemy. That means the affection goes out of being. And Prabhupada's going to say something very interesting in one of his purports, I think in the next chapter, that Prabhupada writes this very interesting purport where he says, it is to be understood that in a past life, the son of Chitraketu was an enemy who took birth as a son in order to die just to give sorrow to the king. I'm like, that's petty on a whole nother level. But whether or not you accept that storyline or not, it's just interesting to say that, the point I'm making to your point is that the affection came into being, and as such, it can come out of being also. So it is not sat, it is asat. Whereas bhakti, which is a type of affection, is sat. So it always exists, it doesn't come into being. So that understanding gets translated as it's inherent, because it has to be, it can't come into being. So it's inherent, it's eternal and perfect. So then that's how, it's all these technical theological ideas that kind of get lost in translation. Honestly, we just have the one English word, which is so ambiguous, and all the theological essences are just completely evaporated in that. So again, a private message, funny, whole new level of petty. Okay, so I think this says here, but wouldn't that mean bhakti is latent, and thus it is eternal and ever living? See, people can think of it however they want, and therefore it is the nature of the soul supporting its kind. Yeah, the soul is kind. Devotees say so like this. Another devotees say it in a different way. The point here is that bhakti cannot come into being. That was why Rupa Goswami writes the statement in the BRS. He wants to say that this bhakti does not come into being, because if it comes into being, then it's not eternal, and if it's not eternal, it cannot be the goal, the paramartha. That's why that line is written there. So now, how devotees understand that? So we already know those lines have been drawn very clearly in the last year, especially. So the different explanations are going to be coming. But the reason for that line is just to say this thing: bhakti does not come into being. Otherwise, that is a general understanding of sadhana and sadhya. You do some sadhana and it brings something into being that wasn't there before. So that is denied. Otherwise, it cannot be paramartha. That is a reason for that line there. So that point we are explaining. And now you can take the other point. You can take however you like. As Krishna says, Rameshena, Sheshena, deliberate fully on this. Yata Echasi Tataguru, and do as you like. Or in this case, think as you like. But the reason for that sentence is this point. This bhakti is sat, it is not asat. That's why he wants to make this particular statement. Okay, does anyone else want to say anything? I think I looked at all the chat stuff. Sometimes I miss, but I don't think I missed anything here.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, I wanted to say something.
Okay.
One thing since you were saying that you were going to read those prayers by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, which basically are prayers or songs which is saying, specifically in regards to Srivas Thakur's son passing away. I was also reminded of that pastime which happened in the lifetime of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, that this person came up to Bhaktisiddhanta and said that, my daughter's...
I also was remembering this. I didn't share it though.
Yeah, that's like the other side of the, the same, you can say scale. He's going to say, can you please help me? If I will chant all the Gauranga's name, and he did so, and still his daughter dies, and then he comes to Bhaktisiddhanta and says, I won't chant any more Gauranga's name because, he didn't give me and then Bhaktisiddhanta is very heavy. So my Gauranga is not like, some, or I'm not sure what he used, something like, he's not a businessman, something of that sort,
Right.
But it's a very interesting section.
Yeah.
And then another comment I was also sharing was like, you quoted that verse in the beginning from Srila Shukadeva Goswami to Parishad Maharaj, where he's telling the reason why he's sharing stories to give the knowledge of, to share and Vairagya and Jnana. Now, in one sense, we can say this book Bhagavatam was written for the people of Kali Yuga in mind, but in another sense, it is being, there are also sages there who are listening. And if they are having a hard time accepting the instructions of Jnana, Vairagya, and just, plain language, and they're being told the same stories, it speaks to the point how much important are the stories, whether it be in being personal, like you were sharing your own story in the beginning of the class, or, the stories of the kings, that they help people digest difficult subject matters.
Yes. Therefore, we mentioned this verse in the beginning of our study of this section, that some shastras teach like a king over his ruling over the citizens. Some shastras teach like a friend. That means through the stories and like moral conclusions from such stories. And some shastras teach like a lover, very indirectly. And Bhagavatam teaches like all three. That's what the verse says. And Srimad Bhagavatam teaches like all three. So we mentioned that shloka at the beginning of our study of this section to make this point as well. Yeah, stories are, especially nowadays, stories are most important because everyone is dumb. So
there's too much information out there.
I was reflecting on this as another word, story or narrative. And there are two types of stories. There's stories that relay the events, the order of events as they happen. You can call this I was using the language, the horizontal storytelling. Horizontal storytelling just deals with the events as they unfold. And then there's the vertical storytelling. So vertical storytelling vertical means going up or down, right? Going up towards heaven or going down towards hell. So vertical storytelling is concerned with the meaning of the events and not just the unfolding of the events. You can cause the contrast between logos. So logos means like order, and mythos. Mythos means like the meaning. And so Bhagavatams, they're less concerned about the unfolding of the events, and they're more concerned about the meaning of the events. They're trying to convey the meaning to the story. That's why sometimes people wonder about the chronology of the storytelling, or did this actually happen? Is this a fact? I was like, what difference does it make? You can never know if it is a fact or not. Even with regular history that we learned in school, they present it to us as facts, but the facts are also as determined by people who wrote the books. And we actually cannot investigate how factual they are. You can look up things and conjecture, well, this is a fact because X, Y, and Z, but who knows how many factors you're not seeing that's distorting your findings. So even when they teach us mundane history, they're more concerned with us getting certain meanings from that history than they are with the actual facts. When I learned about Germany, and what they really wanted me to understand was that Nazis were evil. That's the message. And then here's this fact, here's that fact, here's the other fact, but the meaning is this. So you'll see in the Shastra that they're less concerned about the horizontal storytelling, so to speak, the logos or the order of events. They're more concerned about the meaning of the events. And it is the meaning, if captured, that gives meaning to life. Otherwise, you see people just telling their story like, this happened to me, that happened to me, the other thing. Okay, that's not, how is that useful for you? It's not, many times when you're out in the street alone, I'm here in New York, so there's millions of people walking around. And when you're by yourself, you're not talking. So you always hear different people's conversations. And you hear that everyone's telling like horizontal storytelling. And it sounds completely ridiculous when you hear them telling us, because you need context. You don't know them. So without context, whatever they're speaking sounds like utter nonsense. Whereas when you're telling vertical stories, so to speak, vertical storytelling, even without context, it has impact. Even 2-3 sentences of vertical storytelling, even without context, can be like, wow, I never thought about that. I heard this person talking and they made this really amazing point about something that was going on in their life. So Bhagavatam is like that. They're doing the vertical storytelling. That's the language I'm choosing to use here. And yeah, it's extremely, extremely powerful, obviously, even for people of that time, to speak of the age of Kali.
A quick comment too, and then I have a question. When you say these things like, that, when in school they tell you some historical facts, and then, you never know whether they were true or not, like, or being the Nazis or anything, all these things. It sounds like the last relic of the counterculture, the hippies which Srila Prabhupada was preaching to, because that was the mood at that time, screw this, and who cares about that, and they're all lying. I think there are only very few of those left, and I think I'm one of those such people that
I was saying it as a just like a philosophical point, though, but I am also
No, I don't think. Okay, and then I was thinking that a question you were mentioning about this we're discussing this specific section about bhakti being inherent and not inherent. I was wondering that since Sri Rupa Goswami is making in Krishna's Katha, Sri Rupa Goswami is speaking in Bhakti Samar Sindhu, that verse which you quoted, saying that bhakti is actually coming from these great devotees who have developed in their heart. It's coming by their mercy. So then what is happening to Jiva? Because Jiva is not supposed to change anything, and it has a capacity to love. It's like a dormant capacity. So what is happening? Is that capacity unfolding? But I thought the Jiva was by constitution. I guess I've been talking in terms of, tattva there, that it's not supposed to change anything in it, but it seems there is some change happening there. There is that change happening, is the Jiva just turning his face from looking this way to that way? That means Jiva has a face there. How do we understand the language there? What's happening to Jiva?
I don't know. The idea here is that the Jiva and Bhakti attain Tadatmya Sambandha. So the example of Tadatmya Sambandha is an iron rod and fire. So if the iron rod is stuck in fire, actually the iron rod's nature hasn't changed. But the fire attains some, like Tadatmya Sambandha, like oneness. It is like oneness. It is not actual oneness. The iron rod is still iron rod and fire is still fire. But they attain Tadatmya Sambandha. It is as if they are one. So the Jiva attains Tadatmya Sambandha with Bhakti. That is my general understanding. Just like the Jiva attains the Siddha Deha, which is also a spiritual body, there's Tadatmya Sambandha. And just like you identify with your body, it won't matter how much I say you are not your body. It doesn't make any difference. You can say that until the cows come home. You are your body at the end of the day. And this is true basically for anyone. Even if you're a Jiva Mukta, you don't identify with your body, but you'll still experience the sensations of the body and so on. There's no question of being utterly detached, except for when you're in a state of samadhi and those faculties are suspended. So like that, when there's Tadamya Sambandha with Bhakti, then you attain full identity with it. And you are essentially that body and everything that's happening therein. So it is something like that. Although we have to admit a huge level of trans-rationalism to all of this. I think that's a part of the discussion that doesn't always, people take it as an excuse to not talk about difficult subject matters. So if you say, well, there's something chinti about all this, they're like, that's an excuse because Shastra says this and Shastra says that. But there isn't a huge element of trans-rationalism to all of this. How is it possible that bhakti is like moving in that way? And okay, so is it the jiva or is it bhakti? Like, I still don't understand the idea that the tongue can't chant the holy name. Atashi Krishna Namadi Nambavagraham Indriya. I'm like, I don't get that, because when I decide to chant japa, I chant. Like, what do you mean I'm not chanting the name? I'm certainly chanting the name. And they say, no, because the name is in a higher ontological category than the jiva, because the name is, in fact, Bhagavan. So the name, you're not chanting the name is chanting me. Like, and then the example that Jiva Goswami gives to this particular verse of BRS, Atashi Krishna Namadi, Nambavet Graham Indra, the senses cannot grab the name, etc. of Krishna. The example he gives of Bharat Maharaj in the deer body who chanted the holy name, and Gajendra who chanted whole prayers. He gets a whole chapter in the Bhagavatam of his prayers. How did he chant that with a deer tongue or elephant tongue? Elephants can't sing Sanskrit prayers. Deers cannot sing Sanskrit mantras. So how is it? So Jiva Goswami said, this is to prove that the name was self-disclosed on the tongue. Just as the sun rises in the sky, it has nothing to do with our ability to make it rise. So in the same way that the name, like the sun, was self-disclosed on the tongue of Bharat Maharaj. Those prayers were so it's just like, what does that even mean? Like, and how is it that when I chant, or when I decide to chant, then I chant, like I'm chanting the japa? Someone's gonna say, well, that's not the real holy name, and that's the opera. Okay, whatever. But so my point in saying all this is that there is a level of trans-rationalism to all of this. So keeping that in mind, my general understanding is that the soul his actual nature doesn't change. Just as an iron rod doesn't change when fire attains Tadatmya Sambandha with it. So the jiva attains Tadatmya Sambandha with the internal energy, but his own nature is not changed because of that. But now he has full identity with that. Just like when the jiva merges into Brahman, his nature isn't changed. He is still jivatma only. He does not become Brahman, but he attains identity with Brahman. He attains basically identity with Brahman. He exists in that state, forevermore. But he's actually still jivatma. So in the same way, the jiva attains identity with the siddha deha and the bhakti that moves it, although the jiva's nature is not changed. That's my basic understanding of this answer, of this particular question. That's the best I can do for right now.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, Athena, you can ask, and okay, you can ask. It's 9:30. You can say something final, and then we'll stop.
I guess I can hold my this to another day or tomorrow. But I guess just as a quick, just on your answer, two things. Wait, I guess I'm confused because the Jivatma is Brahman. So when you say that it doesn't.
No, Jivatma is not Brahman. He is like Brahman because his nature is like impersonal. We discussed that many times. He's anu, he has no parts, etc. But Brahman is the indeterminate perception of Bhagavan. So they're not the same, but they are like the same in terms of not having any qualities and that are perceivable. He's not Brahman.
Oh, wait, but I know our Shastra, maybe like even the Gita says we're Brahman, and then Krishna is Parama Brahman. So
Gita says that Maya Shakti is Brahman also. In chapter 10, he says that he calls the material energy as Maha Brahman, the great Brahman. Everything is Brahman. Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. Everything is Brahman. Because everything is not different from Brahman. This is basic non-dualism of Vedanta. Everything is Brahman. So if everything is Brahman, then how do we account for duality? So different schools say different things. And the way we say it is that these are the Shaktis of Brahman. So Brahman is actually God, and one Shakti of Brahman is Jiva. Another Shakti of Brahman is Maya. Another Shakti of Brahman is the internal energy. So, and they are also called as Brahman because they are not different from Brahman. That is the way we explain it. Otherwise, everything is called as Brahman. Jiva is called as Brahman. Maya is called as Brahman. God is called as Brahman. His internal energy is also referred to as Brahman. So, yeah, Gita is saying everything is Brahman. So what is it meaning there? So this is how Gaudis explain it. They explain it as Shaktis of Brahman.
But I guess in this sense, what I meant, well, because even along the, I don't say the correct, but say the Anandi perspective, we are Brahman in the sense that we are self-realized, that the jiva is self-realized in Brahmajyoti. It's kind of like it is. Remember, it's just the soul. It has no spiritual body. It is just the soul. So if it's just the soul, then it is Brahman. I thought, like we are formless. You can say have no qualities. That's the quality of the soul. And so that's what happens or what is in Brahmajyoti. And so therefore we just realize our just original identity of self-realization, reach Brahmajyoti. So I thought that's when we reach Brahmajyoti, you just realize yourself, the self, which is just Brahman.
So you can realize yourself without being merged in Brahmajyoti also, right? That happens to all the Jiva Muktas in this world. They realize the self without being merged into Brahman. So you don't have to be merged into Brahman to realize the self. So Brahman is distinct and the Jiva is also distinct. So of course, again, it depends on how you're using these words. So that's like I said, Jiva is called Brahman, nature is called as Brahman. So sometimes it has to be qualified, but the two are distinct. When we say Brahma Jyoti, that is the indeterminate perception of Bhagavan, or you can say it is his, impersonal energy, however you want to describe it. So the Jiva is different from that.
Okay, thank you. My question was related to this, but I think it will be a longer answer from you, or I'm hoping to have a longer answer, so I'll hold it till tomorrow.
Okie dokes.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks, y'all. We'll pause here. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Thank you.
Go, Nandi. Hari Hari Bolo. Have a good